My name is Ethan Mercer, and for 8 months, I worked overnight security at the Redwater Distribution Complex just outside Moline, Illinois. It was one of those jobs that sounds more intense than it actually is. When people hear night security, they picture something out of an action movie: tactical flashlights, high stakes confrontations, maybe the occasional dramatic foot chase. The reality was 80% boredom, 10% coffee, 10% trying not to fall asleep while staring at grainy camera feeds in a freezing security office. The warehouse complex itself was massive: three interconnected storage buildings spread across nearly 12 acres of fenced industrial property. Most of what we stored was harmless enough: auto parts, construction supplies, electrical components, oversized commercial equipment, nothing flashy or particularly valuable. The graveyard shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I was always alone. There was technically an on-call supervisor, but unless something was actively on fire, you handled things yourself. At 27, I figured it was temporary. Easy money while I finished my certifications for IT work. Most nights followed the same routine: clock in, walk the perimeter, check all loading bays, return to the office, monitor cameras, repeat every hour until sunrise. Simple, predictable, quiet. That changed on January 17th. It was one of those brutal Midwest winter nights where the cold feels alive, the kind that creeps through every layer of clothing and settles into your bones. Snow had started falling around 10:30, light but steady, coating everything in a thin white blanket. By midnight, the entire property looked ghostly under the floodlights. I'd just finished my first patrol and was settling into the security office with stale coffee when the motion alert chimed. Camera 14, Bay 6, loading dock. I sighed. Motion alerts happened constantly: wind-blown debris, snow gusts, the occasional raccoon bold enough to test industrial fencing. I clicked the feed. Nothing. Just the dock. Empty concrete slick with fresh snow. The floodlights hummed overhead. No movement. I reset the alert and went back to my coffee. 7 minutes later, it triggered again. Same camera, still nothing. Then again, and again. By 1:10 a.m., camera 14 had triggered 6 separate times. No other cameras, just that one. That's when I noticed something strange. The action always registered at the far left edge of the frame, same exact spot. Almost like something was stepping into view just enough to trigger detection, then stepping back out. I zoomed in. Nothing. Only swirling snow. Still, the consistency unsettled me. At 1:30, I grabbed my coat and flashlight to check it in person. The moment I stepped outside, the cold hit like a punch. The entire complex was silent, except for wind scraping loose snow across concrete. My boots crunched as I crossed toward Bay 6. Everything looked normal. The loading doors were secured, padlocks intact. No footprints anywhere except the ones I was making. I swept my flashlight across the loading area twice. Nothing. I told myself the sensors were malfunctioning and headed back. But as I reached the office door, I glanced back. For just a second, I thought I saw movement near Bay 6. A dark shape slipping behind the corner of the dock wall. I spun around and aimed my flashlight. Nothing there. I stood frozen for several seconds, then slowly went back inside. I didn't mention it in the log. I didn't even fully believe I'd seen anything. By 2:15, the alerts had stopped. I started relaxing. Then came the sound. A metallic scraping noise. Loud, sharp, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. It echoed through the warehouse. I nearly spilled coffee all over myself. The sound had come from inside Building 2. I immediately pulled up interior camera feeds. Aisle 1, clear. Aisle 2, clear. Aisle 3, empty. Then camera 6 flickered. Static. 3 full seconds of distortion. When the image returned, the angle had shifted slightly left. Not much, maybe 5 degrees, but enough to notice, like someone had physically adjusted the camera. Every nerve in my body lit up. I radioed my supervisor. No answer. Street to voicemail. I called his cell. Nothing. So I did what the job required. I grabbed my flashlight, radio, and company-issued baton and headed inside Building 2. The warehouse after hours was a different world. During the day, it buzzed with forklifts, voices, machinery. At night, under reduced power overhead lighting, it felt cavernous and wrong. Long aisles of towering industrial shelving stretched into yellow half-light. Every sound echoed. Every shadow looked deeper than it should. I moved slowly down the main aisle, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. About halfway in, I heard footsteps. To my left, 2 aisles over. Slow, measured, definitely human. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Security," I called out. My voice sounded too small in that massive space. "If someone's in here, identify yourself." Nothing. I waited. Still nothing. Then, one step. Single, deliberate, somewhere deeper inside. I tightened my grip on the baton. Every instinct screamed to leave. Instead, I moved toward the sound. Aisle after aisle, shelf after shelf. Nothing. No person, no movement, no explanation. By the time I completed the sweep, my nerves were shredded. I returned to the office shaken but trying to rationalize it. Maybe settling metal, acoustics, my imagination amplified by isolation. At 3:07 a.m., camera 14 triggered again. I looked immediately. This time there was something there. A person, standing at the very edge of the frame, tall, thin, motionless, facing directly toward the camera. I couldn't make out facial details, just the outline of a man in dark clothing. He stood perfectly still for nearly 10 seconds, then stepped backward out of view. I shot up so fast my chair tipped over. This was real. Someone was on the property. I radioed again. No response. Called 911, reported a trespasser. Dispatch said deputies were at least 20 minutes out because of the weather conditions. 20 minutes. I stared at the feed. Nothing. Then every camera feed in Building 2 simultaneously flickered. Static flooded all 6 monitors. When the images returned, every aisle was empty, except camera 6. At the far end of the aisle, barely visible in shadow, stood the same figure, this time much closer and facing directly into the lens. Then the camera went black, completely dead. I should have stayed in the office, locked the door, waited for police. Instead, adrenaline and stupidity convinced me I needed to verify. I grabbed the master flashlight and headed back inside. The warehouse felt colder now, almost unnaturally cold. My breath fogged thickly. I reached aisle 6 and swept the light down its length. Empty. Then I noticed something on the concrete floor. Footprints. Bare footprints, wet and dark against the polished surface, leading deeper between the shelves. They looked fresh and impossibly large. I followed them, one row, then another. The prints stopped abruptly at the center of aisle 9, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. That's when I heard breathing. Behind me. Slow, deep, close enough that I felt it against the back of my neck. I spun around. My flashlight beam landed on nothing. No one there. But over my radio, which had been silent all night, a voice crackled through the static. A low, rasping whisper. Just 4 words. "Are you watching, Ethan?" The radio slipped from my hand, and somewhere in the darkness ahead of me, something started running, straight towards me. The sound hit me before my brain could process what was happening. Bare feet slapping concrete. Fast, far too fast. The noise tore through the warehouse darkness like a gunshot, echoing off steel shelving and concrete walls. For one frozen second, I stood there with my flashlight trembling in my hand, trying to convince myself it was some trick of acoustics, that maybe whatever I'd heard was farther away than it sounded. Then my flashlight beam caught movement, a shape, low to the ground, charging straight down aisle 9 toward me. I didn't wait to see more. Every survival instinct I had took over. I turned and ran. The flashlight beam jerked wildly across shelving as I sprinted back toward the main aisle. Behind me, the footsteps pounded closer. Heavy, wet, slopping the concrete with sickening force. Whoever or whatever was chasing me wasn't slowing down. I've never run that fast in my life. I rounded the corner into the central corridor and nearly slipped, catching myself against a steel support beam. The office was maybe 80 yards ahead, too far, but it was the only place with a locking door. I bolted. The footsteps behind me suddenly stopped. Just stopped. The silence was somehow worse. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Nothing. The aisle behind me was empty. No movement, no figure, no explanation. I didn't stop running until I slammed through the office door and locked it behind me. My chest burned. My hands shook so hard I could barely work the deadbolt. I stumbled backward and nearly collapsed into my chair. The camera monitors glowed across the wall. At first, everything looked normal. Then, camera 6 flickered back to life. And there he was, standing directly outside the office door. My stomach dropped. The camera angle only showed his upper body, but what I could see made my blood run cold. He was unnaturally thin. His clothes hung off him in damp, tattered wares. Long, dark hair clung to his face. And his mouth was stretched open impossibly wide. Not screaming, not speaking, just hanging open in this grotesque, frozen gape. His eyes stared directly into the camera, unblinking. I backed away from the monitors. A second later, the doorknob rattled, hard. Then again, violently. The entire metal frame shook. I grabbed the office phone and shouted 911 again over the noise. The dispatcher told me deputies were 3 minutes out. 3 minutes. It sounded impossible. The rattling became pounding, then scratching. Long, deliberate scraping noises across the steel door, as if fingernails or something sharper were dragging down the surface. And through it all came a sound I'll never forget. A voice, low, breathy, right outside the door. "Open it, Ethan." Hearing my name nearly broke me. I crouched behind the desk, clutching the phone, every muscle locked with terror. The dispatcher kept talking, trying to keep me calm, but I barely heard her. All I could focus on was that voice. Again, softer this time. "Let me in." Then silence. Absolute silence. The pounding stopped, the scratching stopped, even the wind outside seemed to die. For nearly 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then every monitor in the office cut to static at once. The room filled with white noise, and over that static, clear as day, came the same whisper from my radio. "Turn around." I didn't want to. Every instinct screamed not to, but I did, slowly. And there, standing in the far corner of the office, was the figure, inside. I still have no idea how he got there. The door was locked, no windows, no second entrance. Yet he stood less than 10 feet away, motionless in the dim fluorescent light. He was taller than I'd realized, at least 6'4", barefoot. His feet were bloody, skin hanging in strips. His clothes looked waterlogged, dark fabric clinging to a frame so thin it looked skeletal. And his mouth. I wish I could forget his mouth. Sunken eyes, pale gray skin stretched tight over sharp bones, and that mouth still hanging open impossibly wide, exposing gums and teeth stained dark red. He stared at me, completely expressionless. Then he took one slow step forward. I grabbed the baton from the desk and swung with everything I had. The metal connected with his shoulder. I felt impact, solid, real. But he didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He simply tilted his head, then lunged. I threw myself sideways just as he crashed into the desk, sending monitors flying. The office erupted into sparks and shattered plastic. I scrambled toward the door, fumbling with the lock. The second it opened, I heard sirens outside. Bright red and blue lights flashed through the office window. The figure froze. For the first time, it reacted. Its head snapped toward the lights. Then it turned back to me and smiled. Not a normal smile. Its jaw somehow stretched even wider, splitting the corners of its mouth. Then the office lights went out. Total darkness. I stumbled into the hallway. Deputies were shouting from outside. Flashlights swept through the warehouse entrance. When emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, the office was empty. No figure, no footprints leaving, nothing. Just unturned furniture and deep scratch marks gouged into the steel door. The deputies searched the entire complex for over an hour. Every aisle, every exterior fence line, every loading bay. Nothing. No sign of entry, no sign of exit, no trace of anyone. I gave my statement. They photographed the damage. My supervisor arrived around dawn, furious until he saw the office. The company launched an internal investigation. They found no explanation for how the camera feeds had failed, no explanation for the footprints, no explanation for the radio transmission, and no explanation for the scratches. I quit that morning, didn't even finish my shift. A week later, one of the deputies called me. He'd looked into the property's history. Apparently, before Redwater built the distribution complex, the land had housed a small private medical facility in the 1970s, mostly psychiatric patients. The place shut down after allegations of abuse. One patient disappeared during a winter storm in 1978, escaped barefoot into the snow, never found. His name was Daniel Vale. According to records, he had a documented fixation on surveillance. He believed cameras were watching his soul. The final note in his file described repeated episodes where he'd ask staff one question over and over. Are you watching? I wish that were the end, but it isn't. 3 nights ago, nearly 2 years later, I got an email from an unknown sender. No subject line, just a video attachment. Security footage, timestamped 2:13 a.m. The camera showed my current apartment hallway, and standing outside my front door, barefoot, motionless, smiling, staring directly into the lens. The file ended after 10 seconds. There was no message, no sender information, and when I checked my building's cameras with management the next morning, there was no footage for that entire hour. Sometimes late at night, my phone radio app activates itself. Nothing but static. And buried beneath it, I still hear that same rasping whisper. I'm still watching, Ethan. My name is Noah Bennett, and when I was 19, I worked overnight shifts at a 24-hour gym called Iron Forge Fitness in Dayton, Ohio. It was my first real job after high school. Nothing glamorous, just something to save money before starting community college. The gym itself wasn't exactly high-end. It sat in a rough industrial part of town between an abandoned furniture outlet and a self-storage facility with half its exterior lights burnt out. During the day, it stayed busy enough. Construction workers, college students, a handful of suburban moms who came in for yoga classes. But at night, especially after midnight, the place became eerily quiet. Membership worked through digital keycards so people could scan themselves in anytime. That meant overnight staffing was minimal, usually just one employee. Most nights, that employee was me. The shift ran from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., 10 hours of wiping equipment, restocking towels, answering occasional questions, and mostly sitting in the office watching security cameras while trying not to fall asleep. At first, I actually liked it. The regular late-night members were easygoing. There was Marcus, a firefighter who lifted after his shifts, Kayla, who trained for marathons, an older guy named Pete, who somehow spent 2 hours every night on the stair climber while reading crime novels. It was predictable, comfortably boring. Until the night I met the man on treadmill 12. It was a Thursday and late November, cold enough outside that frost coated the parking lot by midnight. Business had slowed earlier than usual because freezing rain was expected later. By 1:45 a.m., the gym was nearly empty. Just one regular stretching near the free weights and another guy finishing his cooldown on an exercise bike. I'd already done my third equipment wipe down and was sitting in the office half watching security feeds while scrolling my phone. That's when I noticed him. Treadmill 12, far corner of the cardio section. At first, nothing seemed unusual. New faces popped in occasionally. But after a few seconds, something about him felt off. He was running. Fast. The display showed 9.2 miles per hour. That alone was impressive. Most people at that hour barely managed a light jog. This guy was full-on sprinting. I checked the membership log. No recent scan for treadmill occupancy. Weird. I rewound the entry feed from 15 minutes earlier. No one. No one had entered through the front door. I frowned. Maybe he'd slipped in behind another member. It happened sometimes. Still, I watched. 10 minutes passed. He never slowed, never adjusted his pace, never reached for water, never even seemed winded. That's when the rest of the gym emptied. The regular at the weights left first, then the guy on the bike scanned out. Suddenly, it was just me and treadmill 12. I leaned closer to the monitor. The man looked wrong. He wore torn gray sweatpants and an oversized black hoodie with the hood pulled down. His hair hung in long, greasy strands around his face. His skin looked pale enough to reflect the fluorescent lights, and despite sprinting hard enough to exhaust an athlete, his chest barely moved. No heavy breathing, no sweat, no strain. His expression was completely blank, eyes fixed straight ahead, mouth hanging slightly open. Then I noticed he wasn't wearing shoes. Bare feet, flat against the moving belt. That should have been enough to make me intervene immediately. Gym policy required footwear at all times, but something about him made me hesitate. I don't know how to explain it. There was just this deep, instinctive discomfort, like every part of my brain was quietly telling me not to go near him. Still, policy was policy. I grabbed my radio and stepped out of the office. The gym felt colder than usual. The overhead lights buzzed softly. My sneakers squeaked against polished flooring as I crossed towards the cardio section. He didn't react to my approach, didn't glance over, didn't acknowledge me at all. When I got closer, my stomach dropped. There was blood on the treadmill. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Then I saw it clearly. Dark red streaks splattered across the moving belt, fresh droplets flinging backward with every footfall. The skin on his feet had been stripped raw, shredded. Some areas looked almost down to bone. And yet he kept running, steady, mechanical, like he couldn't feel it. Every instinct screamed for me to back away. Instead, I forced out, "Sir?" No response. I raised my voice. "Sir, you need to stop the machine." Nothing. His mouth slowly opened wider, not naturally, too wide. His jaw seemed to unhinge slightly as he ran. Then, without turning his head, he spoke. His voice was low and rasping, flat, emotionless. "Are you there?" I froze. "What?" He repeated it, same exact tone. "Are you there?" I stared at him. For some reason, the question hit me harder than it should have. Like he wasn't asking conversationally, like he was trying to confirm something. I swallowed. "Sir, you need to step off the treadmill." Again. "Are you there?" His speed increased, 9.5 miles per hour. Blood now sprayed behind him in rhythmic bursts. I backed away, fast. The office suddenly felt very far. I turned and hurried back, resisting the urge to run. Once inside, I locked the door, then immediately grabbed my phone to call 911. Before dialing, I glanced at the monitors and nearly dropped my phone. He was staring directly into camera 8, still sprinting. His face filled half the frame, eyes wide, unblinking, mouth hanging grotesquely open. Blood poured down the treadmill behind him. Then he screamed. Not words, just one long, guttural, animalistic shriek. The sound echoed through the entire building. I stumbled backward. On the monitor, he leapt off the treadmill without slowing, didn't even hit the stop button. The belt kept spinning. He landed barefoot on the floor and sprinted out of frame. I frantically clicked through cameras. Cardio section, empty. Weight room, empty. Locker hall, nothing. Then I opened camera 14, employee hallway. My blood turned to ice. He was there, standing 20 feet from my office door, completely still, head tilted, staring straight at the camera. I lunged for the deadbolt and locked it just as the doorknob rattled hard. Then came another sound, slow scratching against metal, and his voice muffled through the door. "Are you there, Noah?" The sound of my own name nearly made me scream. I called 911, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The dispatcher kept me talking while I huddled beneath the desk. Outside, the scratching grew louder, long nails dragging down steel, then pounding, heavy enough to shake the frame. He started screaming again, that same inhuman shriek. The lights flickered, the monitors flashed static, and just before every screen went black, I saw him, not outside the office door, but inside the hallway camera feed, but somehow standing directly behind my chair, smiling. The monitors cut to black, every single one. The office dropped into near darkness, lit only by the pale emergency glow from the exit sign above the door. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I was still crouched beneath the desk, staring at the blank screens, trying to process what I'd just seen. The man, standing behind my chair, inside the office. That was impossible. There was only one entrance. The door in front of me was still locked, and the pounding on the other side hadn't stopped. It was still there, heavy, deliberate blows rattling the steel frame, which meant whatever I'd seen on camera 14 couldn't have been real. It had to be some kind of glitch, a delayed feed, anything else. I clung to that explanation for exactly 3 seconds. Then I heard breathing, close, slow, wet, coming from directly behind me. Every muscle in my body locked. The pounding outside stopped instantly. Total silence. I could feel the breath against the back of my neck. Cold, steady, like someone standing inches away. I didn't want to turn around. Everything inside me screamed not to. But I did, slowly. And there he was, standing between the desk and the wall, close enough to touch. The office was so dim I couldn't see every detail at first, just the outline of his body and the impossible way he seemed to lean forward without losing balance. Then lightning flashed outside through the narrow office window, and for a split second, his face lit up. I still see it when I close my eyes. His skin was stretched unnaturally tight over his skull, almost translucent. Dark veins webbed beneath the surface. His eyes were too large, glossy, and black like polished stone. And his mouth was split almost to his ears. Not torn, not injured, just built wrong. Inside was row after row of small, jagged teeth packed too tightly together. He tilted his head, smiled wider, and whispered, "Found you." I don't remember deciding to move. Instinct took over. I grabbed the metal desk lamp and swung it with everything I had. The base connected with the side of his head. The impact jarred my arms, but he barely reacted. His head snapped sideways, then slowly returned to center, still smiling. I scrambled backward, overturning my chair. He lunged. I dove for the door. My fingers fumbled at the deadbolt. The second it clicked open, I threw myself into the hallway. I hit the floor hard and rolled. Behind me came that scream again, so loud it felt physical. I staggered up and sprinted toward the front lobby. Bare feet slapped rapidly behind me. closing fast. I didn't look back. The front desk panic alarm was 30 yards ahead. If I could hit it, police dispatch would get a direct emergency signal. I reached the counter and slammed my palm onto the button. A deafening alarm erupted throughout the building. Red strobe lights began flashing. The footsteps behind me stopped. I turned. He stood at the edge of the hallway, motionless. The flashing lights strobed across his face, freezing his expression in violent fragments. Smile, blankness, smile, blankness. Then his mouth opened impossibly wide, and he screamed. Not at me, at the lights, at the alarm, at the sound itself. He staggered backward, clutching his head. For the first time, he looked distressed, almost panicked. Then, before my brain could process what I was seeing, he spun and sprinted into the dark gym. Gone. The entire encounter had lasted maybe 15 seconds. I stood frozen, gasping for air. The alarm blared, my ears rang. Then came another sound. Sirens. Outside. Police had arrived faster than I expected. 2 officers rushed in through the front entrance. I could barely speak. I pointed toward the cardio section and managed to choke out. He's still inside. They drew their weapons and swept the building. Every room, locker areas, storage closets, bathrooms, office. Nothing. No sign of him. No blood trail, no broken doors, no forced entry, no footprints. Nothing. Except for the treadmill. Treadmill 12 was still running, and the built was drenched in blood, fresh enough to glisten under fluorescent light. One officer shut it off. The room fell unnaturally silent. I gave my statement twice, then again to my manager when he arrived. No one openly said they doubted me, but I could see it in their faces, especially when the officers informed us of something impossible. According to entry logs, no one had scanned into the gym after 11:42 p.m. The last legitimate member had left at 12:18 a.m. No entries after that. No exits either. And all emergency exits remained alarmed and untouched. There was no recorded way anyone could have entered or left. I quit the next morning. Didn't even wait for my shift to officially end. I turned in my badge, collected my final paycheck, and left. For weeks after, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, that face, those shredded feet hammering on the treadmill. Eventually, life moved on. I started school, got a new job, forced myself not to think about it. Then, about 6 months later, I got a call from Detective Sarah Kim, one of the officers who'd responded that night. She asked if we could meet. Curiosity got the better of me. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She slid a thin file across the table. There's something you should see. Inside was a faded newspaper clipping from 1998. The headline read, "Local man vanishes during overnight gym session." The article described a 23-year-old named Adrian Cross. He'd been a member at Iron Forge when it was still under different ownership. Staff reportedly found his belongings beside treadmill 12 at 3 a.m. The machine was running, covered in blood. But Adrian was gone. No surveillance footage explained what happened. No body was ever recovered. I looked up at her. "Why are you showing me this?" She hesitated. "Because after your incident, we reopened the case." She turned another page. Photos. Security stills from 1998. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. Adrian Cross was standing on treadmill 12, barefoot, mouth hanging open, staring directly at the camera, the exact same face I'd seen. I felt physically sick. Detective Kim leaned forward. There have been 4 similar incidents over 28 years. Different employees, same treadmill, same description. Did anyone else see him? Only the night staff. I pushed the file away. No, She nodded grimly. There's one more thing. She handed me a printed screenshot, current security footage, timestamped from 2 nights earlier. Ironforge had changed ownership again. New branding, new cameras, same layout. And there, standing motionless on treadmill 12 at 2:07 a.m., was him, waiting, still barefoot, still smiling. The gym permanently closed a month later after unresolved operational issues. That's the official statement. The building still sits empty, dark, abandoned. Sometimes when I drive past late at night, I glance toward the windows. Most are black, but every once in a while, just for a second, I see a single treadmill running inside and a pale figure sprinting endlessly in the dark, waiting for someone to ask the wrong question or answer his. Are you there?